On March 9, 2013, Indianapolis hosted its first ever Symposium on bullying prevention as a step toward creating a culture of acceptance. The day was filled with discussions, information, and inspiration to challenge our thoughts and perceptions around bullying and preventing these harmful acts. There were 3 goals for the day: to raise awareness of the serious nature of bullying and how it impacts every sector of our community, to help participants understand that prevention is the most effective way to address the problem, and to empower attendees to become actively involved in preventing bullying in both individual situations and in the larger community. Nancy Willard, the director of Embrace Civility in the digital age, spoke about effective ways to prevent cyberbullying.
Now the way. Hi, it's great to be back here. My first time in Indiana was actually with the Safe Schools Conference, wasn't in downtown. Then I came to a Girl Scout conference here, was in downtown, found your incredible restaurants, and then I came to some other, anyway, I've been here a while, so I'm not exactly home, but I knew how to get to the restaurants pretty well last night. What I'm going to be talking to you about, there's one problem with life, and that is that you keep changing. And you'll note that I'm no longer with the Center for Safe and Responsible Internet Use. I was, but I've changed. Have a new name. It's called Embrace Civility in the Digital Age, and a new website. And the URL will be at the end of my presentation. And after kind of, because of my experience, I've been kind of dancing in these 3 circles of technology, youth risk, legal issues for a while. I've changed my focus from, focusing on youth risk online. We've got to recognize that young people, they don't see these divisions that we do. We're the digital immigrants. They're the digital natives. For them, it's just life, okay? Life. And so what we have to be looking at is youth risk in the digital age. And how does that change the risk? So one of the really key things that really emerged to me is that a lot of our current bullying prevention thinking is adult-centric. We think adults can solve these problems. Adults make policies. Adults teach students. Have you ever tried to directly teach students about anything related to digital? They are OFL. They just will not listen to adults because they know darn well we don't know what we're talking about, okay? Adults aren't present in the digital environments. And young people aren't reporting to adults when they're getting into negative situations. And adults aren't doing all that a good job responding. Study out of New Zealand, 75% of youth think that adults make things worse if they're told about cyberbullying situations. So adult-centric bullying prevention strategies, we've got to be doing our jobs, we've got to be doing our work, but if we remain adult-centric, we're not going to be effective. So it became really, really clear to me that what we've got to do is shift to peer-based leadership and intervention. The only way we're going to be able to address this is to shift to that manner. So I was looking around, okay, who's doing, how do we encourage young people to step in and help, either digitally or in person? Nobody's doing anything. Where's the research? Well, there's little bits of research in all different parts. Some folks with the Kiva program up in Finland are doing research. There's some research going on in Italy. Ken Riggs down in Australia, just little smatterings. It's like the wise men looking at different parts of the elephant, and they're all looking at different kinds of things. And so what I did is actually I've developed a program to help support positive peer intervention. But I've been doing this presentation bit for a really long time, and I don't want to come and sell a program. So what I'm going to talk to you about is what is the research basis behind positive peer-based intervention. Now that's what I was planning on talking to you about. And then a couple of weeks ago, I became aware of a bunch of other things, and I've actually had this really, I call it profound new insight into bullying prevention. And so I decided I needed to share it with you because it also relates to the legislation that is, I think it's passed your House. It's still it's in the Senate now on a new bullying prevention legislation. So what I'm going to talk about first is Bullying and Harassment Prevention and Intervention 2.0. And then we're going to go into the research on positive peer-based interventions. So here's the prologue. Change. Have you seen literature says, you know, after a number of the school shootings, schools really started to pay attention to bullying in the late 90s? That's not what caused the change in schools of paying attention to bullying. What happened was in 1999 was the case of Davis versus Monroe. And in the case of Davis versus Monroe was the first time that schools found out that they could be held liable for student-on-student harassment. And all of a sudden they started to pay attention. However, over the last decade, the way, okay, so in Davis versus Monroe, I'm now in my little circle of law. In Davis versus Monroe, the standards were that the situation had to be really severe, pervasive, persistent. The person engaging in the bullying, the school had to have some authority over that person. The school had to know this was occurring, and they could only be held liable if they were deliberately indifferent, okay? Over the last decade, schools have defended themselves, saying we weren't deliberately indifferent because every time this was reported to us, we did something. Now, in this particular case, this young man was being bullied, harassed. Sorry, it's not bullied and harassed. It was harassed. Harassment is the civil rights. For over a 3-year period of time. And yes, indeed, every time it was reported, they did something. But this kid was harassed for over a 3-year period of time. And the circuit court, up one level from the district court, said, hey, if it's not just that you do something, it's what you do has to be effective. This is game change. I'll tell you why it's game change. And I just put these slides in. I'm not sure I have. Yeah. National Crime Victimization Survey. Only 36% of students who are bullied report to somebody at school. Catherine Bradshaw did a study, and she found out that 60% of students think that school staff make things worse when they intervene. Tell a trusted adult. Only 10% of school staff thought they made things worse. Oops, let me go back. One other study, Youth Voice Project. 42% of students who were bullied at a moderate to very severe level reported to the school. 34% of the time after they reported, things got better. 29% of the time after they reported, things got worse. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of things getting better if you report to a trusted adult. What grade would we give students if they got things right 34% of the time? So, we've got schools who are getting things right 34% of the time. The other thing that came, that just realized, and meaning I figured this out a week and a half ago, is we are functioning, I mean, I've been in bullying prevention for a decade now. I just figured this out. We have 3 different definitions of bullying going on. There's the academic definition, intentional acts, imbalance of power, repetition. There's the statutory definition, which is totally different. Severe physical violence or significant interference with learning or activities. And then we've got the popular definition, which is somebody's hurting me. I'm feeling bad. Now, what we think is happening is that we're measuring academic. In fact, we're not. But what's happening is that educators are being taught about bullying using the academic definition. Statutes contain the statutory definition, but students are reporting based on the popular definition. Now, this is going to be really important for you to understand because you've got legislation pending that's requiring schools to report. They're having all sorts of problems in Florida and New Jersey where they already have this reporting requirement. Why are there problems? Well, because the educators are being given information on bullying prevention that's all grounded in the academic definition, which has nothing whatsoever to do with the statutory definition, and the kids are reporting based on their perception that somebody's being hurtful, which could include a huge range of kinds of activities. Other problem with reporting. Bully reports from the perspective of the school is a black mark. So what happens? Set up mechanisms to discourage report. We only have 36% of kids are reporting. Okay? What do we want to do? We want to increase the effectiveness of interventions so that we find out about these situations so we can help them. Or they characterize these incidents as not bullying, which they can do because a lot of times its conflict doesn't meet the statutory standards. So schools that increase their effectiveness in interventions should have an increase in reporting of bullying incidents. If they do, that's going to lead to a damage to their reputation. What you measure is what you get. And what you're going to get when all you're doing is measuring bullying reports is discouragement of kids reporting and schools ignoring or discounting the reports. Another challenge. Pennsylvania, they've had a 3-year implementation, well-funded, close to $8 per student for all 3 years of the Blueprints model program, the Olveus program, 3 years, no reduction in the rate at which students were reporting bullying. No reduction. The elements of this program are recommended by many professionals as this is what we need to be doing. And this is a, quote, evidence-based best practice. This calls into question what it is we're recommending that schools do, and it calls into question how programs are being deemed evidence-based. So how do we deal with all of these issues? You know, we've got the academic definition, we've got the challenges with the statutes versus that, we've got questions about the recommended bullying approaches, which are all kind of adult-centric, industrial age developments. We've got questions about how do we do effective investigations and interventions. I'm going to talk more about that in my session. And we've got questions about what actually the term determination of evidence-based actually means. So we got some myths going on here. First myth is that we have a consistent understanding of bullying and harassment. We don't. What we've got to shift to is using the statutory definition, because it's the only definition that can be objectively measured. We have the myth that researchers are actually accurately measuring bullying and harassment. There's no survey out there that's measuring bullying based on the statutory definition. Big myth, big problem in New Jersey. You know, we can't figure out what's bullying, how to report, etc. If we shift to these objective standards, that should help in assessment and accurate reporting. If it's not bullying, school doesn't have to do anything. That's nonsense. If it's a conflict, if it's, you know, the schools have to respond. Just because they don't classify something as bullying doesn't mean you tell it to go away. Requiring schools to report is going to reduce bullying and limit its harmful effects? No, it's just going to hide the evidence. So what we need to do, and this is my strong recommendation, that what's going to need to happen in Indiana with this reporting requirement is that you need a second measurement. You need an ongoing measurement of school climate and effectiveness of interventions. And then you can say, yeah, our rate of bullying went up. Why? Because kids feel safer reporting. You've got to have the second level of measurement. And I'm going to be working on, that's high priority, is to work on a survey that assesses bullying based on the statutory standards and assesses school climate based on the effectiveness of interventions. The legal standards by which schools are judged are clear and consistent. No, not. There's differences. National School Board Association and the Office for Civil Rights are totally at odds. And we've got a changing legal standard. But I would lay odds. Within several years, you're going to find out, hey, let's assume that the standard means that if you're intervening, it has to be effective. Cyberbullying. There's lots of confusion. There shouldn't be. Schools clearly have the authority to respond to off-campus cyberbullying if it's interfering with the students' learning and involvement in school activities. There are evidence-based approaches. Well, the best research evidence-based approach just was implemented in a 3-year top-of-the-line implementation, and it wasn't effective. So what we've got to do is support better innovation in situations where we're evaluating carefully. Best way to respond, zero tolerance. I think that's why the interventions are not effective. I think that's why students know. If you suspend the bully, all that happens is that he or she will retaliate and you're going to be branded a snitch, weakling, wimp. So we've got to shape interventions to increase resiliency, remorse, remediation, and restoration, my 4 R's. Another myth that's constantly put out there is that conflict resolution and peer mediation are not effective approaches. We've got to have kids trained in conflict mediation, conflict resolution, peer mediation, because they're the ones who are present in the environments where this is happening, and they can use it informally. And I also think that we need to, and I'm working on a teen court kind of approach to involve young people in actual interventions in schools. So what I think needs to be done isn't evidence-based, proven, but this is what I think schools need to be doing. This is bullying and harassment, prevention and intervention 2.0. We need to have school-based measuring. School climate, negative incidents, in accord with the statutory definitions. We need to know how many students are reporting, and we need to know the effectiveness of the interventions, and we need to know how many kids are stepping in to help. We need to make sure that we've got positive classroom school management practices. That's the groundwork that we start with. Positive expectations, community building, and we've got to shift from the extrinsic reward, tokens and that kind of stuff, to more intrinsic motivation with positive norms and community building. Every school needs to have a comprehensive plan for social emotional development. The community building part of the behavior management is part of this. We need direct instruction in social emotional. Integrated instruction, there's some really great curriculum out there where the social emotional issues are integrated into language arts or social science studies. And informal opportunities like class meetings, advisories. But it's got to be a comprehensive plan. Student leadership. Bullying is socially motivated, and we're not going to stop it until the students say it needs to stop. So we need student leadership in planning. That means getting that data and then sitting down with students and saying, what do you think? Tell us what we need to do. We need to increase positive peer interventions, and I think we need to use peer-based interventions as part of working with actual reported incidents. In the investigations, we have to focus on the factors that are going to support remediation and restoration. The degree of culpability of all participants, the severity of distress, interference with learning or activities, and the pervasiveness, persistence, power. These are all standards that are based on the legal guidelines, and we've got to shift over to those. Absolutely have to pay attention to protected class issues, race, national origin, sex, that includes sexual orientation, and disability. We have to really focus in on those kids who are being bullied because of protected class status. Have to pay attention to the research of Philip Rogan, who's talking about different kinds of aggressors. We've got the socially motivated aggressor and the maligned. Generally, we hear about the maligned, the kid who has lots of at-risk behavior. And I hope I don't stimulate any unnecessary political commentary here, but we had a gentleman running for president who was a bully when he was in high school. So not all bullies end up going to prison. Some of them end up running for president. We've got a lot of the alpha wolf kind of bullies who we need to be dealing with. And we've got to address the challenges of the target. If you're a target of bullying in school, you're going to continue to be, if you don't change your target you're going to be targeted throughout school. You're going to get into dating violence and domestic violence situations, and you're going to be targeted at the workplace. We've got work to do with the targets. So from interventions, this is my 4R approach. We've got to focus on resiliency for the target, remorse and remediation by the aggressor, restoration of the target and the community. And we have to evaluate. And this can't be done by doing some kind of evidence-based best practice. You got to figure out if it's working in your school. And we especially have to evaluate all incidents. And that's going to be critical to avoid litigation. And we should expect and hope that students increase, that we have an increase in reports of bullying because we're doing a better job helping them resolve those situations. So, that was added just recently because that was my brilliant new insight. Positive peer intervention. So, here's the state of the research on positive peer intervention. Folks up in Finland are looking at, now you're on the little sheet, and by the way, these slides are going to be on the website, but the document that you have at your table, the very large one, the very creative one, I was really excited. I just I'm going to do my handout differently this time. There is on my website, the URL is on the bottom, in the plan for Be a Friend, Lend a Hand is an entire overview of all of the research that this is based on. fully cited, but the citations would have taken up half this page. So that's why this isn't cited. But the people up in Finland, they're looking at things like affective empathy and social status, and then in Italy, they're looking at things like perceived peer norms, sense of personal responsibility, social self-efficacy, and so people are looking at different aspects of this in different places. Bob Selman up at Harvard is looking at friendship basis and kind of stuff. So what I've tried to do is pull this together, and this is my kind of frame of let's pull this all together. So when kids witness bullying, they have a choice. Boil it down to three. They could hurt, they could, support, join in, or they could just passively observe or walk away, or they could help. Three choices. So how could they help? There are three ways they can help. One is they can reach out to be kind. Two is they can tell the one who's being hurtful to stop. Now this can be done publicly or privately. And privately is the one we need to encourage more. Three is they can report concerns to an adult who can help. So, three ways they can respond, three things they could do if they want to be a helpful ally. So what's the research say? First of all, most bullying is socially motivated. The vast amount of bullying is not being done by the socially maligned kid who's the really hugely at-risk child. Most of it is done to attract attention, gain social power. Now, I used to own a horse. I grew up in Idaho, and she was pastured out in a pasture. Every time a new horse came into that pasture, there was bullying because all the horses were jockeying for position. Bullying is not learned behavior. Bullying relates to survival of the fittest. It's ethnographic, I think is the term. Bullying. Kindness is the learned behavior. That's why the golden rules in every single religion or spiritual philosophy in the planet. Kindness is the learned behavior. Bullying is socially motivated by young people who think that they can get attention or power through doing it. And the ones they bully are the same ones who get kicked out of the wolf pack. They're the ones who are perceived as different. And the reason the bullying really picks up in middle school is because at that point they're the ones who are perceived as less attractive sexually. Because survival of the fittest means you have the, so that's what's going on. Cyberbullying. It's really public cyberbullying, not the nasty text messages, but when you've got those, we hate Javon websites or profiles or stuff like that, that's highly socially motivated. It's all about attracting attention. Recent research out of California, you have to ask two questions if you're asking. Most students think bullies are cool. The assessment of a bully as being cool is not what I think about this person, it's what other people think about this person. They're perceived as being powerful, thus cool, popular, but they're not well liked. It's really important to maintain that distinction. You've got to understand that most bullying does not occur in the presence of adults, and often students don't report. I heard a delightful panel of a group of LGBT kids, and they said, the teachers in our school are all just really up. Bullying isn't occurring in places where any staff member's present. It's just shifted to the places where they're not. Most students think bullying is wrong. Most feel sorry for the target. Many of them would actually like to help. And when they do help, they can be very effective. They can be effective in stopping it, and targets who have friends are far less distressed. But when it actually occurs, far fewer students who indicate that they would help actually do help. What are the factors that influence whether or not they're going to intervene? Some of this comes from the early bystander research, Kitty Genovese. But I've expanded it a bit. First of all, noting a situation and interpreting it correctly. It means just being socially sensitive, but it also means having that degree of affective empathy. That's where the social emotional learning comes in. Oh, you know, I think that really is probably really hurtful to that person. Feeling of personal responsibility, that's a value. That's a personal value. We'll get to that. Having sufficient personal power, having effective skills, and being in a supportive social environment. Those appear to be the key factors to support intervention. Very fascinating, came across the work of Eva Fogelman, and she is the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, and she has done research into the rescuers, and very common patterns within those families. Acceptance of differences, belief that individual action mattered, loving altruistic homes, strong sense of self-confidence, and there was a support network. It functioned in secret, but there was a support network. What discourages? There was a really interesting study. I think it was a graduate, it wasn't ever published academically. I think it was a graduate study done in Denmark, I think. And the guy was in the classroom for a while, so he was known and kind of had faded into the background. He set up a situation, I think this is like 6th grade, but in an elementary environment, so they were out for recess. Set up a situation with a kid where the kid was on the floor crying when the other students came in. Almost all of the students just went to their seat and ignored this child. One student went over and said, "Hey, what's up?" Okay, went to his seat. Only one student in this class of 25, 30 actually went over to this kid who was on the floor crying and stayed with him. And this is similar to a bullying situation. So afterwards, what he did is he interviewed the kids, said, "Hey, what happened?" And what's really fascinating was that their responses fit in with the research that was done by on the bystander effect. Very big one. Well, you know, I'm not responsible. The teacher's responsible. His friends are responsible. So it's not my job. I need to mind my own business. I could embarrass myself. Somebody might think I liked him. That's one of the girls responded. Nobody else is doing anything, so why should I do anything? The one kid who responded, his response basically focused on personal responsibility for the well-being of others. Hey, somebody needed to do something. He was being hurt. He didn't actually go into it in his study, but I suspect that the kid who responded had higher social status. Now, I've also, this really isn't really solid in the research, but I've been paying a lot of attention to Bandura's mechanisms for moral disengagement, both as a way that those who engage in aggression justify what they're doing, but also if you fail to intervene, if you have this belief that you should intervene, you have the personal value, but you fail to intervene, then you also will rationalize why you didn't intervene. Okay? Bandura says it's reconstruing conduct. I simplify it, spinning it. Hey, they were just joking. Somebody needed to do it. Now, my little voice thing, this actually came from the slide of talking about kids who engage in bullying, but someone else should have done something. I need to mind my own business. deny the harm. Wasn't that bad? People just overreacting. Dehumanize the victim. These are the 4 ways that, especially the socially motivated young person who engages in aggression, that's how they rationalize their aggression, and these are the 4 ways that people rationalize not stepping in to help. So let's look at the factors that will support positive intervention, and it turns out that there are both personal factors and social factors. Motivation, it's your values. Personal responsibility for the well-being of others, accepting of differences, affective empathy, and having a personal connection with the one who's being bullied plays a role many times. So we get to these personal values through social emotional learning, and it's also family, and it's also just what's the climate within the school. So that's what we need. That's why we've got to focus on that comprehensive social emotional learning. Personal power. This is all, teens will tell you, it's where you are on the social ladder. Okay, so if the kid who's engaging in bullying is here and you're down here, there are some significant risks of stepping in to help. You've got the risks of embarrassment, the risks that this powerful person is going to have friends who help, risk of retaliation. It's a social, where are you on the social ladder in the school? And if the target's down here and you're here, that could lead to risk of embarrassment. One of the kids in the panel, the LGBT panel that I just heard, he said, look, I have lots of friends who aren't gay, guy friends who aren't gay. And one time this guy was just really saying nasty things to me, and my friend was standing right there. He didn't say anything. So I asked him afterwards, why didn't you say anything? Well, because they might think I'm gay too. This is a friend. You know, so that, you know, it's all about where you are on the social ladder. So what we've got to do is, you know, the kids who have the higher social status, really encourage them and give them more power to intervene. But then the other thing is, we can use what's called a positive social norms approach to change some of this social status issue. And I'm going to talk about it. The positive norms approach uses uses survey data to help students understand the actual norms, and I'm going to go into that more. Social self-efficacy, skills plus confidence. You have to have the skills, but you also have the confidence that you have those skills. So what we have to really focus on are the skills that reduce the risks of failure and embarrassment. So private strategies and safer public strategies. The social factors, friendships apparently plays a significant role. If you're friends with the target, you're generally going to be more inclined to help the target. If you're friends with the aggressor, you're going to be more inclined to support the aggressor. If you're friends with both, you might mediate or you might just stay out of it. If you're friends with neither, those other personal factors about how responsible do you feel for the well-being of others are going to kick in. The key thing from this study, and that came from Bob Selman's study, he's with Harvard, is that there's a real key factor of encouraging friends of those who are being hurtful to step in to help. Why? Because if you're viewed as a hurtful participant, that's also going to hurt your reputation. You're not going to be well liked if you're viewed. The critical factor is perceived peer norms. What students think other students think about those who are hurtful, those who are supporting those being hurtful, and those who step in to help. Students behave in accord with what they perceive the peer norms to be. If their perception of the peer norms are to discourage bullying and to encourage intervention, then we're going to have them increase their intervention. So again, we have to do the positive norms data. We also have to look at the culture of the school, culture of acceptance. We don't do that, we celebrate differences, and staff have to model that. Shared responsibility. Get rid of that diffusion of responsibility. It's not just the school's role. It's not just the staff. Everybody's responsible for stopping bullying. What if you see a fight about to break out and you're on the way to class and you're going to be late? In your school, can you justify saying, whoa, I need to do something, I need to go tell somebody, and I'm not going to be considered tardy. It's going to be, well, I'll be tardy, but it'll be excused immediately. Are the rules in the school MYOB? Or are they everybody's responsible? And how effective are the investigations? Because the students aren't going to do that last, report concerns if it's not going to be effective. So we have to regularly assess school climate. See, this relates back to my earlier slides. So all of this research led me to believe there are two things we need to do. We need to increase effective skills, and we need to change students' perspective of peer norms. So the way I work is I start focusing on the research, and then if I'm going to do something new, I look and figure out what somebody else has done to see if this is effective. So these are the strategies that I found that appear to be effective. First question. Last time you were in the hotel, spent 2 nights, did you hang up your towel? How many of you? Come on. How many of you hung up your towels? Okay. Those of you who didn't hang up your towel, how do you feel about that? The majority of people in here did. Well, there's a really great study on the psychology of influence. They went to a hotel, they measured towel hanging. They put this card in the room, said, hey, 76% of the people in this hotel hung up their towel to help protect the environment. Rate of towel hanging went way up. Then they changed it, and they said 75, whatever, percent of the people in this room hung up their towel. Boom, rate of towel. Yeah, if you're measuring my behavior, I'm gonna, okay? That's why the measurement of school climate. Do you actually step in and help? So, hey, anybody do that in bullying prevention? Yeah. Drs. Craig and Perkin are actually not bullying prevention folks. What they did is they went into school and they surveyed students about their perspectives of bullying, and they demonstrated them on posters. Did this in middle schools. This is the only thing they did. They had 17 to 35% reduction of bullying. It's the only change that was implemented in the schools. So what we need to do is use local survey data to reinforce positive norms. High regard for those who intervene, low regard for those who are hurtful, low regard for those who support those who are hurtful, and that the majority of witnesses aren't supportive. Another approach, Sources of Strength. It's a really excellent suicide prevention program. And what they do is they use students. It's a student leadership program. So we need to have them. We need to have student leaders. So we set up a situation where they are telling themselves what they think about how they are treating each other. Okay? No expert can compete with that. They are telling themselves what they think about how they treat each other. And we just set this up using student leaderships, that we've got to use students to convey these messages. University of New Hampshire, this is a program on dating violence, and they have these really creative posters that you might not be able to see. This is, what can we do? What can we say? Friends, watch out for one another. Now, we have to focus on what strategies are safe. I'll show a little bit more about that. In the public strategies, I always suggest that they work as a team, power of 3. private strategies that are safer. But I think instead of having an adult-created poster, we need to focus on reinforcing their strategies. So we need to ask them, how can you reach out to be kind? How can you say stop? And then it's, again, telling them what they think, and then having them create their own posters where they're saying, this is what I did. But it's not just bullying is wrong, it's this is how you can respond. This is what you can do. The Expect Respect program, I've got some major problems and concerns with the Expect Respect program, but they do teach about attention getting. They tell you if you're targeted, you should say stop and walk away. And if you're told stop, you should walk away and reflect. And those things I think are very, very positive with that. So we have to make sure kids understand that those who are engaging in bullying are doing so for attention-getting purposes. And that if you're in public, the best thing to do is say stop and walk away. I've changed that to say what you need to do is you need to get two friends. International Institute for Restorative Practices has a series of questions that they suggest you ask peers and who've been hurtful, and the intent is to lead to a restoration. What happened, what you're thinking, what your thoughts, have you been affected, what do you think needs to happen next, are their questions. I have some different ones. So this focus on having friends tell friends to stop. I think we need to help young people recognize when their friends are using these mechanisms for moral disengagement, how they can influence positive behavior, and how they can help their friend stop and make things better. And there's this great book called Influence, Science, and Practice. I have no idea how to pronounce his name. Cialdini? Anyway. And he's identified 5 major influences on behavior. And I incorporate as many of these influences in my work as I can. Reciprocity, treating others, this is a golden rule, treating others as you want to be treated. Commitment, if you make a commitment to personal value and you write it down. Social proof is one of his, that's just positive norms. Liking, if you like the person who's delivering, so that's why we need to use students to deliver these messages. And also the role of authority. What important adults in your life would think. My intent is not to market my program. I didn't bring marketing program, but I would love it if you'd be interested. But here's how I have put all of these things together into a program to try to influence positive peer intervention. First of all is a survey. What's your reaction if you see somebody's bullying another? I really don't like to see it. Bullying often deserves it. It's no big deal. It'd be fun to watch. Bullying is the one who's popular and cool. What words would you use to describe a person who helps when he or she sees somebody bullying another? 2 of the other open-ended questions are, what could you do to reach out to be kind? And what could you do to say stop? And those are open-ended because we want kids' guidance. Then you establish a student leadership team. And the materials that I've developed, this is a poster on one side and a slideshow on another, are then modified with the local data. You get how many people in our school really don't like to see those being people bullying others. Now, the reason I'm using this kind of 10, I've got 10 kids, I've got 10 that look happy and 10 that look sad, is so that they're thinking. I'm trying to influence those who are engaging in hurtful behavior. You know, if I'm being hurtful to somebody and I look out and I see 10 kids, I need to think, this is how many actually don't like what I'm doing. Maybe I might change my mind. So I'm trying to use the approach that the social norms folks did. But now we need to also reinforce the positive peer perspective of those who help. And you can do a tag cloud with the words that the actual words that they use. And then the other thing is that I instruct the students to print off all of those words, and and so it's their words, and you can show the students, here's what you all said about those who step in and try to help. A variety of questions. One question is, how important is it to try to help? That usually ends up in the 80s range. And then I ask another question about how likely would you help? I don't have the slide on that one in here. Did you witness and did you help? And then I ask those, was anyone hurtful to you and did anybody help? So that's what this slide is, a combination of two data. It's how many students said it was important to help, and when someone, and this is what kids who are being bullied said about how many actually helped. So you set up for them, they're going, whoa, we're not doing what we said we would like to do. But then you have to ask, what are the barriers? And there's another 4 or 5 barriers on another slide. And you got to discuss, what are the barriers? How do we think about those barriers? And how do we get around them? And then we have to focus on positive skills. They need to know that reaching out to be kind is actually the best thing they can do. And it's the safest thing they can do because they can do it in private. How do they reach out to be kind? Here again, you have this huge list of what they said. We don't have to teach them how to reach out to be kind. They know how to reach out to be kind. We just have to show them that they know how to reach out to be kind. Here's what they said. They could say. This is actual student data. We teach them how to safely say stop. You have to keep yourself safe. Don't get into an argument that's attention getting. Don't retaliate. And be a friend by helping your friend stop. Because there's another slide, who do you admire? And they find out that people not only don't admire those who are being hurtful, they don't admire those who are helping or supporting those who are being hurtful. So it's another positive social norms. If you're going to say stop publicly, do it with the power of 3. You know now that a lot of other kids don't like to see this happening. So each of you can say or post stop, and then walk away or stop posting. And make sure you help the one who's being hurt leave. How can you say stop? You also. These are all the ways. They know how to say stop. They know what the words are. And what's really fascinating is you can go through, it's really fascinating to look at what the major themes are in what they say. Golden rule comes out about 25% of the time. We don't do that here. Social norms, and you could actually, I think, assess, if you do this over time, you can assess what the values of the school climate are. It's not cool, but how would you feel, and what did he do to deserve, those kinds of things. It's really fascinating just looking at how they say you should say stop. This idea of saying stop privately, how can you help your friends stop? Asking these questions, what are you thinking? How would you feel if somebody did that to you? What would others think? Challenge those excuses. Well, I was just a joke. Everybody's doing it, the Bandura's mechanisms. And focus on making things right. Now, I want to tell you how I figured out this thing about the golden rule. I have a son who's adopted from India. He came home at 4.5 years weighing 19 pounds. He has profound short stature, reduced insulin growth factor, and reduced growth factor. And he's tiny, and he also has learning disabilities. So he's still wearing, actually, size 12 shoes. He's a freshman in high school. He went into a new middle school, and he didn't know many of the kids, so I was paying, this is middle school, and he's tiny, and he has learning disabilities. He's also socially incredible. But we were sitting in the hot tub, and I said, it was a couple weeks, said, are you having any problems with anybody being hurtful? And he said, no, Mom, I know the trick. Look, I'm the expert here. No, Mom, I know the trick. I said, okay, what's the trick? Well, if they say something mean to me, I just look at them and say, how would you feel if somebody, if you were something different about you and somebody said hurtful things to you? And they say, well, I actually wouldn't like that, and then we can generally be friends. So, most of my bullying prevention at this point in time is from my young guru, who in 6th grade told me how he handles people who are being hurtful. But I think especially, how do you help your friends stop being hurtful is something we really need to reinforce. And how you help your friends make things right, the restoration. And what to do if somebody says stop. Also, focus on making things right. We need to make sure they know when they should report concerns, and essentially, it's any time that would really not be safe for them to step in, or if they've tried to step in and it hasn't helped, and if it's not safe for them to do anything. Or yeah, if it's a fight, something like that. And then I also think that this is part of the psychology of influence, getting to a statement of personal values. And I suggest that we have students do their own statement of personal values. What are your values about helping someone? Why do you think this way? How would you tell a friend to stop? What concerns might stop you from helping, and how can you deal with those concerns? And what could you say to somebody who helps? Positive reinforcement for somebody who helps. And my recommendation is that we have kids express these values and then fold up the paper, tape it, put their name on the outside. This isn't for somebody else to see. This is their statement of personal commitment. It's who you are as a person. This isn't who you are as I'm measuring you. It's who you are. And the other thing I think we need to be doing is student posters that really focus on positive norms and effective strategies for intervening. Using student insight to do PSAs. A couple of creative ideas I had is do kind things day. You know, just at the beginning of the day, hey, set up a big jar, you know, one of those things that they use for making wine, and say, okay, anybody who does something kind today can put a penny, nickel, dime into the jar, and if you don't have any money, come to the front office, we've got some change up here, and we're gonna fill up that jar. And what the job is, come to school and do something kind to somebody who you just don't usually interact with. And do the coin, and then we'll take that money and we'll give it to a local charity. Or a Be a Friend table. I heard this, one school set up a table, the student leader set up a table, said, this table is where everybody belongs. And we don't care if and nobody knows you, whatever. This is the table where everybody belongs. It became the most popular table in the entire student lunchroom. We have to identify and reinforce those kids. This is adult identification of those kids who are really helping. And we need to keep following up. Now for my program, I also have a collaboration approach on Facebook. I've just launched this program. It hasn't gotten going. Can't launch a program in spring. Everybody's into testing. So that's who I am. I have no idea what my time is, Nancy. You've got 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So let's talk. What do you think?
I'm just curious. I didn't hear any other information on the way kids perceive that school administration or other trusted adults make things worse. In what ways?
Exceptionally limited data on that. The Stan Davis and Clarissa Nixon are doing some research on that. It's called Youth Voice Project. So if you search Youth Voice Project, you can find their data, and I think they have a book coming out. It it seems to be a range. What makes it, I think, worse is they tell me that it's my fault or to go away. Don't bother me with it, which is going to increase because you're now having to report bullying. The fear is that it's going to increase. But just saying go away, I think, is the worst. And the best responses are providing emotional support, being there. And then intermediate is, sometimes punishment works, sometimes talking works. It's all, and that's part of the problem, and that's one of the things I'm trying to address with a better investigation approach. Is really figuring out at a more granular level what's going on between these young people, so you can figure out what is going to be the best intervention in different kinds of situations, because they're all different. There's not going to be anything, sometimes you do need to kick the kid out. Other times kicking the kid out is just going to, sometimes all the kid who's being bullied needs is to be able to talk to somebody, so there's no cookie cutter, but with the exception of don't bother me is the worst. Yeah.
We're thinking of setting up school families of groups of kids that are in different grade levels that they get together with, say, like once a month consistently, where they form bonds with each other, and then we're hoping that peer where, you've got an 8th grader who may step in with the 4th graders because, hey, that's my family member. I just wonder if you have any experience with that and what you found.
Are you in a K-8? Yeah, okay. Really cool. My kids went to, my 2 older went to a middle school where they had a Where Everybody Belongs program, where the 8th graders were responsible for setting up, had this group of 6th graders coming in and that kind of set that up. The other thing I think, and I'm really just getting going on how do we do a better job of investigation and intervention. And I'm really challenged by that because I always, as you can tell, I start with the research. What do we know from the research and how do we put that together? Ain't no research in this area of how do we, and I've asked all of the bullying prevention professionals out there, where's the research on effective intervention? And Stan and Clarissa are the only ones who are just starting to look at that. But this whole thing about family, I also think that maybe some kind of a big brother, big sister approach might work specifically for those students who are being bullied. So let me try this out on you. This is just kind of, okay. The young people who are the targets, we've got to figure out how to shift that. So I'm starting from pretty much scratch, although pulling a little bit from the sources of strength approach. So we know that we want to get them supporters. So we ask, who are your friends? How can you get help from them? What teacher in the school or staff member, because it could be the custodian, is the one who you trust the most? And I want to make sure that you know if anything hurtful is happening, you can go talk to that person. And then the principal talks to the staff person and say, hey, you've been identified as a good friend. I want you to check in with this kid every other day, okay? But could we try a big brother, big sister approach? So if you've got a younger student who's being bullied, have a specific friend who's a couple years older, whose job it is. Their job is to check in and make sure the kid's doing okay. So the other things that I think with targets is they have special interests, okay? Hopefully not playing computer games or video games, but what are your interests and how can we get you involved in those interests? So we got supporters, interests, friendships, making sure the parents know that they've got to foster friendships with other kids at school, and that's getting together after school, et cetera. And what could we do at school to get them more friends? Teamwork activities in classrooms, stuff like that. Personal, physical strength. If you're walking like this, one of you over here brought that up. You got to stand tall. If you walk tall, yeah, even if you walk tall, you're less of a target. So self-defense classes, Aikido, martial arts, walking tall. Even if you have the PE teacher, step in and try to help the kid learn how to carry themselves physically. And lastly, we've got to note that some kids engage in impulsive and irritating behaviors, and we've got to just say, hey, you got to stop that. You got to realize that that's not helping, and you're going to have to stop that. So that's one of those things. But yeah, I think family groups like that really helpful. Yeah.
I would just like to say that I'm at a high school, and I'm the campus minister of a high school, and we had an incident of bullying that was physical and brutal, and so it made us stop and take a look at our environment. And through that incident, it became a positive energy instead of a negative energy, where we did survey. We surveyed teachers, we surveyed students and parents, just to identify that, yes, we do have a bullying problem. Mm-hmm. And then what we did was we engaged students. We have a group called Project Irish. And the Irish is instilling respect and stop harassment.
Cool.
And most of the students, and I have about 20 students that are on doing this mission, have been bullied. And we sit around and they share their story, and it's instant relationship because they have empathy for each other. Yeah. And then we took it a step further where we spoke to the student body. Our students presented their program to our faculty, which is not an easy thing for them to do.
Yes.
And then we also now we go to other elementary, ours is a high school, we go to the elementary schools in the area, and the students present the program totally. And usually one of them shares their story. And this is about our 7th or 8th year, and this year we actually went to 9 schools in 3 weeks. Now we're a private school, a private Catholic school, but we've also, kids want to go to their public schools that they came from. And so the other thing we've done is we've identified a staff person for the victim and one for the bully. The bully needs as much help as the victim does. And in that confidentiality, the best result is resolution. But in the first incident, the resolution did not come to this student until he was a junior in college. But he did come to that, and he never did confront the bully, but he had to come to it on his own through working retreats, through doing some introspective reflection, and seeing that our school took his situation very seriously, and we're trying to do something about it. The measurement that is hard is to say, how effective is it? Somebody told me that bullying is like crime. It's never going to go away, but we can't stop working at it. Yeah. So this is a real affirmation for what we're doing, and so I appreciate
Dynamite, that. Dynamite. Are you using the golden rule in the Good Samaritan, Ms. Catholic?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of thought so.
we have that, and yet we don't, the kids don't, I don't want to say, we start out with a prayer, but they really don't focus on the spirituality part of it because kids aren't there. Yeah. You know, grade schools are like, yeah, I love God, but I'm being bullied. Where is he? You know, so it's not necessarily the spiritual aspect other than the heart aspect. Yeah. It's more the heart. So that's why I'm here today.
Cool. Can I make just one slight change? Okay. I think we need to stop calling young people bullies, and I've tried really hard not to do that. I've shifted to aggressor and even try not to do that. The problem is so many slides on those who engage in bullying, those who engage in aggression is what I try to do. It just doesn't fit on slideshows. And I also really hate the term victim, because if we use this term victim, then the perception is that we haven't been able to respond. If somebody's hurting me and I handle it, then I'm not a victim. I'm a target. I was the target of hurt, but I wasn't victimized. Victim depends on how we respond. At the IBPA conference that Dan and I presented at, I had the opportunity, the board, I know some of the board members, and I found out before the conference that they wanted to do something with youth. And I had no idea what to do, and I said, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And had this great friend who's a clinical school social worker in West Virginia, who I knew, kind of like you, leader in using kids. And so we pulled together some of the kids from his school and a girl from the local area and had them on a panel. They only gave us half an hour because they didn't think we'd have that much to say. Started, and I asked this group, there were 600 people in the room. I said, how many of you are using students in leadership positions in stopping bullying? And about 40 hands went up in the audience. Dan, am I right? Yeah, about 40 hands. It's like, anyway. So I had the kids prepared. If you ever do this with kids, if you're going to do a youth panel with kids, I really highly recommend this. I had them prepared. I said, you have 2 minutes at the beginning, 2-3 minutes, to you tell the audience what the most important thing you want them to hear. And then we're going to go to questions. And so Gary sat up with them on the stage. I just a couple prep marks, asked the question how many, and then I got out into the audience and had the kids field the questions from the people in the audience. Okay, couple strategies for how that works. And that's what, so what I'm hoping is all of you we're going to be out there and we're going to be really focusing on this youth empowerment, youth engagement. What happens when you do that is that by being in the audience and being somebody who they trust, they can look at you and it takes away the stage fright. And so that helps them be secure, but also by simply letting them respond to questions from the audience totally builds their credibility. It's like, it's not planned. It's not, I came up with these questions and we talked about it and they knew what they were going to respond. It's immediate and it's real and the audience gets it. And so that's what we really need. So
Nancy, that is
great
advice. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for our keynote speaker, Nancy Willard.
Thank you very much.